Thanks for having me. You know, I feel like it's pretty unfair, though, of Summit to have me standing between you and whiskey. So, a bit jerky, but it's not that bad. But, actually, I don't think that jerks shouldn't be allowed. Jerks can actually be effective sometimes. Jerks in the right organization can help you move past tough issues. They can say the things that aren't normally said. Instead, I try to avoid assholes. An asshole just causes conflict for no reason. Sure, jerks can be unpleasant, but assholes take up too much time. Life is too short to work with them, and you're going to be spending too much of your life on your startup. So, I've worked at a bunch of different startups over the years, most of them not listed here. I worked at Microsoft for a while, which acquired one of those startups. I invested in companies at Coastal Ventures and through Highway1. I started Ignite, which is on all 6 inhabited continents. But I have one other credential that I like to talk about, which is I go to Burning Man every year. This, surprisingly, has been one of the things that's taught me most about teams. Going to a high-pressure environment in the desert, building absurdly huge and crazy art projects is a great way to get to know people. And I've learned that doing something fun outside of work is one of the best ways to figure out who you could work with and how you perform under pressure. But I'm mostly here because of Highway1. At Highway1, I work with hardware companies as they try to take their prototypes and turn them into products, as project teams try to become companies. We've worked with 150 founders from 58 different companies as they've tried to figure out how to go to market. That includes Navdi, well before they had their first version of their heads-up display for cars, and it raised $6 million. That includes Modbot, which are 2 Australians trying to reinvent industrial robotics. And that includes Jewelbots, Sarah Chips, who's speaking here somewhere, and her attempts to help girls to learn to code through jewelry. And when we're bringing in companies, we look at the PCB, not the printed circuit board, though that's part of it, the product, the company, and the business. So the product, do we think this is something that should come into the world? Is this something that customers want? Is it something customers need? Then we look at the company. That's the team. Why are they the people who are trying to create this company? Why are they the ones to do this? Out of anybody else who could be doing this one thing, why them? And then finally, we look at the business, the size of the market, the margins, potential revenues. We want to know, are they creating a new market? Are they doing something like what Glowforge is doing, where they're making 3D laser printers that nobody else ever thought that they wanted? The first thing to remember is that you're building a company, not a product. So you have to start thinking about culture from day one. You have to start thinking about that with your founders. The first people that you hire will hire the next 100. And those 100 will create the culture. Now, if you want to make money in technology, that's pretty easy. You could take a prototype and launch it on a crowdfunding campaign. You could make an app and throw it up on the App Store. But if you want to build a sustainable business, not a one-hit wonder, then you have to start thinking about the company from the beginning. You're going for scale. You have to think in years, not months. And if you're thinking in that way, you have to think about your founders from the beginning. Because the number one thing that kills our companies are founder issues. Out of those 150 founders, we've had 10 of them leave within a year of coming to Highway1. We've had 2 CEOs leave. Early investors can sense when there's tension between the founders. Early employees or potential employees can figure this out. This is a person or people that you're going to be spending more time with than your significant other, unless you're lucky enough to be starting a company with that person. The best companies are the ones that have known each other for a long time. Ringly, the founders and investors had worked at Hunch and then eBay together. Switchmate, that team had known each other for 8 years before they started the company. Transformair, well, that brother and sister team grew up together, but not everybody's so lucky. So when you're first starting a company, you have to think about three things. Because this is the hardest thing you're going to be doing. You are going to be starting a company, trying to birth something without much money, working long hours, without any external validation. And so those three things, you have to figure out what to look for. What does your company need? You have to find collaborators to fill those roles, and then you have to continually tend the relationship. It's not something you can assume, oh, I have this co-founder, I have this early employee, they're going to stick around. You need to really focus on them and make sure they feel comfortable in the company. So what to look for? Well, when you're starting a company, you want smart people who do things. You want people who are resilient, who are going to keep trying. And you want people with high emotional intelligence. You know, at Microsoft, most of the people that were let go were not let go because of technical competency or because they couldn't do their job. It's because people didn't want to work with them. They couldn't work with others. They weren't effective in that way. And that's doubly important in a startup environment when it's just you. You need to know what the startup needs. Now, pretty much everybody in an early stage startup is going to be a generalist. They're going to be working on all the things at once. But you still need owners. You need to define those roles. And I like Dave McClure's model. He always looks for a designer, someone who's going to represent the customer, someone who's going to make sure the product is beautiful and works well. A hacker, someone who's going to build the software and own the stack. A hustler, the person who's going to get out there and do all the business dealings, handle marketing, and basically catch everything else. And if you're in hardware, we like to look for a maker, the person who's actually going to build that object. So after you know what you need, you have to find collaborators. You have to find people that you can get along with, that you can share a vision with, and who are going to work besides you. So if you aren't lucky enough to know people that you want to work with, or in a position to work with, then you have to start searching. Here at the Web Summit, it's probably a great place to meet people. But you can also go to things like hackathons, meetups, to try and find people. But if you're starting to work with people you don't know, then I always think you have to get to know the person first. You have to make sure they're someone you'd actually want to spend several years of your life with, that you'd want to share the equity in your company with. As I mentioned, I like to go to Burning Man, get out of work to get to know people and to figure out how they're going to do. Are they going to be able to handle the pressure? But that's not always, an option for you. So instead, I suggest that you start small. Build a small side project together. Build a website in a weekend, or perhaps attend a startup weekend together. Orion Labs is a company run by a friend of mine. And they basically make a Star Trek communicator badge. So press the badge, push to talk, connects to a global network, easy to talk to. Seems like a relatively simple concept, right? Now, this is the model that Orion worked with. They figured it would take about $10,000 to build a proof of concept, another $100,000 to actually get to the prototype, and then $1 million with about 20 people to get into production. They ended up taking 3 months, 4 people, and $20,000 to build their first prototype. And this is just a circuit board that could actually connect to an iPhone and transmit audio. And this was just the beginning. Over the next year, they had to add another 15 people and spend another $1 million to actually get the service ready for production. But it's because they knew that that core early team could work together when it was small, that they were able to work together when it was hard. And they continually tended to the relationship. The co-founders go out together, they make sure that they're in touch with each other. One of our companies, Lully, they help children sleep through the night. At an earlier accelerator, they were paired up with a counselor who taught them what their conflict styles were. And they started meeting together for 30 minutes each week to try and figure out, what issues are we dealing with right now? Is there anything that we're not talking about? Is there anything simmering in the background? They still do that to this day, about a year after they formed. And that is one company where I never had to counsel the founders. They already knew what their issues were. But things will go wrong. It's something that happens. There's always tension in a startup. And if you don't know how to resolve your conflict, it's going to boil over. Now, often between founders, it can be about equity and salary. But the reality is that most of you want to work together, so you can work through this. The real issue comes when there's no money at all, when you haven't been able to raise, and when you are doubling down, you're betting your life savings, and no money is coming in the door. One of our companies right now is facing that. They just realized it's going to cost them about double what they thought to get to production. So they need to raise $2 million to actually get their product to market. And this started to cause tension because the CEO and the CTO were out fundraising constantly, and product work stopped. Stress started to build up. So we sat down and we talked through it. And the way this is going to work is the CEO is going to go out and do the fundraising. The CTO will continue to make progress, keep moving the product forward, keep iterating. And when they find a promising lead, then the CTO will come in, but only then. And that way they're able to keep moving forward, and things can happen twice as fast as opposed to taking twice as long. So remember, when you're building a company, you're not building a product. You have to think about the culture from the beginning. The people that you work with in the beginning, they either make or break you. Founder issues can destroy that company in the beginning. Always think about what you're looking for, find people you can collaborate with, and tend to the relationship. And don't hire assholes. Thank you very much. All right, we have time for Q&A if anybody has any questions. All right, well then I'm just going to rip through a couple of suggested resources for after this talk. One, if you're doing hardware, I'm going to pimp my own book. We talk about teams, but we also talk about how to handle crowdsourcing. This is the book that we want all of our applicants to read before coming in the door. But for general startups, I recommend, there you go. I recommend The Hot Seat. Dan Shapiro has started 5 different startups. Robot Turtles was just one. It was the most backed game on Kickstarter. Glowforge just raised $30 million in crowdfunding. These are basically his tips and hints. It's a great book in easily digestible little essays. If you haven't heard of it, the Startup Podcast. It's a great kind of 10-chapter series by Alex Bloomberg. He just goes through the doubt, talks with his significant other, talks with his would-be co-founder and would-be investors as he tries to create Gimlet Media. It's pretty honest. And then finally, I recommend you go to Burning Man. It's just a great place. It's fun. I think you'll have new ideas for your startup if you come through there. And if you can't make it all the way to Nevada, there's actually a Burning Man regional happening in Ireland this weekend called Smoking Crags, so you should check it out. All right, that's my real end. Thank you very much. Take care.